Hello, you are welcome to today's lesson. My name is Ebenezer and I'll be your instructor for today. As you can see from our topic, today we'll be studying on how to write an essay, which is a line graph, okay? So let's look at our topic for today. Or let's look at the question, the sample question we'll be using for today. The line graph below shows radio and television audiences throughout the day in 1992, and now you should summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. We have now been told to write at least 150 words. So this is our line graph, which is actually showing us the radio and television audiences throughout the day in 1992. So we've been asked to write on this particular graph. So let's go on with it. When you are given any test like an Ielts question on writing task 1, your first thing that you should do is to start to look at the question, examine the question, and plan the whole test, okay? And you are required to use at most 5 minutes to just glance through before you start to write. So let's look at the steps that you go through before you start to write your essay. Before you start to write the essay, I would urge you to sit down and analyze the question first, and also look out for your main ideas, okay? When you talk about analyzing, it means that you are looking through the whole test, checking from the question itself to the diagram and all other parts in order to understand the question fully. So if you checked our previous videos, we've been able to go through the analysis and the meaning of it. So the first 2 steps you need to take before you start to write your essay is to first to analyze the question, and then you look out for your main features, okay? You look out for the main features within the graph. When we talk about main features, they are the obvious part of the graph that when you take a glance you can find. So you just have to look at it and then we go through it. Our essay will be divided into 4 paragraphs, okay? So when writing, you start with the introduction first, then we write our overview, and then we take 2 features out of it, okay? So we will group our paragraphs into 2. When it comes to the main features, we will describe the first main feature and then the second main feature. One thing you should notice that while we are going through this, I'll be talking about every single thing that you need in the analysis, how to look for the main ideas, and how to write all the introduction, overview, and then body paragraph. Note down, when we talk about introduction, is the first part of the essay where you tell the audience what your graph is about, or what the picture is about, and then the overview is about the general, okay, the summary of the graph. When you look at it as a whole, what do you see generally? So that's exactly what we will be describing here. And then the main features is where we pick the most prominent part of the essay, and then we describe it in detail. We make comparison, okay, and then we also talk about each and every one of them in detail. So we'll be looking at it more in depth, okay? But this is what you should know, that we deal with it in 4 paragraphs. We start with an introduction, then the second paragraph will be the overview, the third paragraph will be our first main feature being described properly, and then we take the last feature, which is the second main feature, being also described in detail. Okay, now let's start with the first step, that is analyzing the question. So we talk about when you are analyzing a question, it means you are going to examine the question to understand every part of it. So here you're just going to look at it as a whole and examine every part of it. Look at the question itself, the topics in every part. So we just check it and look at what is needed in order to have a full understanding of our question. So we look at the tasks that have been asked. We will look at so the tasks that have been asked will also be checked to understand what to provide to the examiner. So we examine the question itself and also the tasks that have been asked. Okay, so if you look at the question, we have been asked to do some few things. The first thing is that we have been told to summarize the information. We have also been asked to select and report the main features, and also we have been asked to make comparisons. So these things have been we have been given this task to perform. So it's very important that we do this in every single step that we take, okay, in order not to miss it, because that is what we have been told to do. And we have also been ordered to write at least 150 words. So these are some of the things that you should be looking at, and if you're able to meet these tasks, then it means that we are going ahead of our band and we are actually increasing our band. So let's say our first step is to analyze the question, that is to examine the question, to understand every part of the question, and also examine the tasks that have been asked in order to know what to provide to the examiner. So during our previous sessions, we were able to talk about how we can analyze every kind of question, and when we came to the line graph, we were able to get some few things that we should ask ourselves when we want to analyze a question. So the first thing was that what type of graph are we looking at? Okay, so we will analyze the line graph by asking and answering these questions. First of all, we ask ourselves, what type of graph are we looking at? Okay, so if you look at this, we have a line graph here. Is there any title on the graph? So we can see we have radio and television audience in the UK from October to December 1992. And then what is this graph talking about? So we saw that this graph is talking about like television and radio audience throughout the day in 1992. Okay, and who are those involved? We can see it's actually about the television and also the radio, and also when, at what time. We could see that this one, we can see from here, it was actually in 1992, but when we come into the question itself, it has more than just 1992. You can see from October to December, right? So you can see here October to December, right? So it's just not in 1992, but we are analyzing it from October to December, what happened. And even if you check from here, we checked from 6 a.m. to the next day 6 a.m. okay, from 6 to 6. Okay, so within the day from October to December, all right, to 1992, that was when this whole thing took place. All right, so that is how we can see the thing to be. And then where did they mention any kind of place? Yes, we can see here radio and television audience in UK. Okay, so we can see the place here to be UK. So this is what you do when you ask these kind of questions. You'll be able to get a full idea. So we can see that this is actually about the audience in the UK and the percentage of audience, the percentage of population that actually watch the television and also listen to the radio in the UK from October to December, every morning, every single day. Okay, from October to December, from 6 to 6. Right, so we have an idea. You can see that because you have been able to go through these steps, it gives you more insight on the question. So I would urge that you follow these kind of steps to help you. There are other things that you can also consider when you are dealing with line graph. It's not just about looking at the type, the title, but you also have to look at the unit of measurement. Did they talk about any kind of measurement like percentage, money? Was it about, was it any kind of unit of, is there any kind of unit of measurement? And as you can see from the question, the graph below shows the radio and television audience throughout the day. It doesn't show any unit of measurement, but when we look at this side, it tells you that there is something here, right? When you look at the y-axis, that is the vertical line, you can see that it's just talking about percentage here. So 0%, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% and 50%. So it tells you that this is percentage. So our unit of measurement here is actually percentage. So if you don't look at these things properly, you might not be able to find it. And if you look at the keys are the things that are within this particular box, showing these signs. Okay, so you can see there's a long dash and a short line. So a long line and a short line, right? If you look at the longer one, that one is for the television. So we can take the television from here. You can see that this one actually indicates the television. And then if you take the short one, then you can see that it is the radio. So we have this one to be for the radio. Okay, so we know that television is for this line, and then the radio is for that line. So this is how you do your analysis. The analysis will give you more insight. It will also allow you to look at every part of the question even before you start. All right, and we also have to look at, now we check the unit of measurement. We know it's percentage. The keys, we have two keys, which is the television and radio being the shorter lines and the television being the longer one. We also check for the information on the x-axis and also the information on the y-axis. Okay, so the x-axis here is for the one down here, which is the horizontal line, and we know that that one comes in. The information on the x-axis shows the time of day or night. The time of day or night. So if you take the morning, it starts from 6 o'clock in the morning. We have noon, 12 o'clock noon, 6 o'clock in the evening, and then 12 o'clock midnight, and then the next day 6 o'clock. Okay, so it shows that 6 to 6. So the information on the x-axis shows time of day or night. If you take the information on the y-axis, it actually shows what? The percentage. So let's read the information here. It tells us that percentage of UK population. So you know that the audience is in percentages. Okay, so this is 10% of UK population, but it doesn't end there. It said the population over 4 years old. So it's not about those that are below 3 years. We just counted from 5 years, right? From over 4 years. So not 4 years and above, but over 4 years. So anyone that is over 4 years was counted. All right, so from 4 years then going, that is above 4 years, yeah. So the population is for those that are above 4 years or over 4 years. So this one also gives you even more insight to it. So I know definitely this question is about the people, or the percentage of people over 4 years in the UK that watch both radio, listen to radio and watch television from October to December in 1992. So we just counted the percentage, the proportion of people over 4 years that listen to the radio and also watch television in the UK from October to December in 1992. Okay, so you can see that the more you analyze it properly, the best way for you to also summarize and also write your introduction. All right, so let's just fill all the answers and see what we have here. All right, let's check through our answers. So as stated, the type of graph is the line graph. The title of the graph is the radio and television audience in the UK from October to December 1992, and that's what we have it here. What are we talking about? We are talking about the percentage of people who listen to radio or watch television throughout the day in 1992. So throughout one day, throughout the whole day in 1992. And what are the variables involved? The television and also radio. They are the variables involved. And when, at what time, or within what period was this particular thing taken? We are talking about within a day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. All right, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. From 1992. From October to December in 1992. And where is this taking place? In the UK, right? So we stated that other things that we need to also consider when dealing with the line graph. the unit of measurement, which we said is percentage. Okay, so it's here, percentage. What are the keys? So the keys are the things in here, and we said the keys are the television and radio, and we stated that the television are the long dashes and that of the radio is a short dash. We also check for the information on the x and y axis. So we said that this is the y axis and this is the x axis. So we stated that with the vertical line, it shows the proportion of British above the British population above 4 years old, the proportion or the percentage of UK population over 4 years old. And also the B, which is the horizontal one, shows the time of day or night. So this one gives us a whole view of the essay. All right, so after you have understood the question, you know what you are dealing with, right? The next thing that you do is that you need to look out for your main details or the main features, and that's what you're going to do, to look out for the main features. But before you can look for the main features, remember we said the main features are the key part of the essays that you see, that you think that it needs to be reported. All right, so those are the things that we are going to talk about. You don't have to report on every single thing in the essay. If you remember when we were dealing with the when we were talking about the marking criteria, we stated that we don't want to mechanize our essay, so we want to make sure that we are more flexible, we understand the question and share the ideas, the key ideas in the essay. So we have to look out for the main features within the essay. And remember, from our task, they said we should summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons of those main features. So the main features is a key part of the essay that you need to find, okay, so that you can summarize it, you can select, you can report on it, and also make comparisons. So these are some of the things that you should know: summarizing, selecting, reporting, and comparing the main features. These are the things that you should know. So we have to look for those main features before we can do the summary. We will write that we have selected it properly and report on it. All right, that is to describe it and also make comparisons where relevant. Before you can do that, all right, before you can get the main features, you have to understand the type of graph. And this time it's not about the graphic, whether it's a line graph or not. We are looking for the type of graph in respect to the timeline. Okay, so the timeline is the period of time that this particular research was done, or this particular essay was given, or this particular graph was actually done in. So you can see that this particular graph, we are talking about a time period here. So the line graph, the graph below shows the radio and television audience throughout the day in 1992. Okay, in 1992. So if you look at it, if you look at the topic, it states that it's bound between two lines, October, December. Okay, and here we can see it started from 6 o'clock a.m. to the next day 6 o'clock a.m., which shows a full 24 hours. So you have to look for the graph in respect to a timeline. If your graph is bound between two timelines, or it's just a single time or no time period at all. So if it is bound between two timelines, it has a name we give to it and a way we look for the main features. And if it's a single timeline or have no time period at all, then also it has a name and a way we look out for the main features. So depending on the timeline, the graph can either be a dynamic graph or a static graph. When we talk about dynamic graph, it means that this graph is bound between two times. So you can see here, it's from October to December. All right, it's from October to December. Okay, and it's from 6 a.m. to another 6 a.m. It shows two different times. It's from one particular period to the other. So that's what we call the timeline in which that particular essay was taken, or that particular research was taken. All right, so that is what we call timeline. So if it is a dynamic graph, then it is bound between two times. If it's a static graph, then there is no time period or just a single period. Like this, maybe it's just in 1992. But this graph is a bit confusing. If you see it at first, just the 1992, you would think it's a static graph, but it is not, because of this one, October to December, and also 6 o'clock to 6 o'clock, as it states here. It's throughout the day, right? Throughout the day. So it shows you that it's from one period to another, and it can be confirmed here, 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. So from this graph that we are using, our sample question, this graph is actually a dynamic graph. So why is this important? When we are dealing with dynamic graph, that means that we are going to talk about trends. So trend here means that we are looking at what happened throughout that period, right? We are looking at what happened, what changes has happened. So those changes that have happened is what we call trend. Okay, the changes that have happened throughout that period is what we call trend. So that's where you get something like increase, decrease, and the rest. Okay, so that is why we call trend. So those are the changes that have happened throughout that period. And dynamic graph, you'll be talking about trends and be comparing the trends, summarizing everything, and selecting and reporting on them. If you have static graph actually have just one period, and that one you just have to be comparing the variables, because you don't know whether it has decreased or increased. You don't have any decrease or increase changes in trend. It's just within a particular period. It's just one time, maybe on Monday or just in 1992. So it's just a static day or a single day. So you don't have it increasing or decreasing. Okay. So because our graph is a dynamic graph, that means that we are going to talk about trend. Now, because you are going to deal with trends, there are several questions that you can ask yourself to get the main features from this graph. When you are dealing with dynamic graph, as stated, there are a set of questions that you can ask yourself in order to get the main features from the graph. And because you are dealing with trend, that is changes that has happened within that period, these set of questions will help you to get all the main features that you need from the graph. Not all of them will be able to get you the answer, but at most you'll be getting most of the answer from them that you can use to write your essay. So let's go through them. When you're dealing with dynamic graph, these are some of the questions you can ask yourself. First of all, you can ask that how is this graph behaving as a whole? So when you look at it at a glance, totally, how do you see the graph behaving? All right, how do you see the graph behaving? So that is the first thing you ask yourself. Now, totally, that's what you be asking yourself. So you can see from here, the television, radio, it just went up and came down. Television having some kind of fluctuation, but still going up and coming down. All right, you don't have to state the specifics, but you just have to look at it at a glance. It went up and came down. Same with this one, also went up and came down. All right, so at a glance, that's what we see. I can even see that that of the television was higher than the radio, especially within the evenings. Okay, so these are some of the things that you'll be looking at. But how is the graph behaving as a whole? So you'll be answering that question. Now, the second question you can ask yourself is that what are the trends of the individual variables? So individual variables, that is the television and radio, if you look at them, what are the trends of these variables? How are they behaving individually? Now check, the first one was wholly, when you take all of them, but this one is about the individual variables. So when you take television alone, how is it behaving? When you take radio, how is it behaving? How was the behavior of the audience, right? What are the changes that happened as it goes on, right, in time? What are the changes that happened? Now, for the individual variables, the third one is, are there any exceptions from the general trend? So sometimes you might get some of the questions that you have all of the variables going up, but you get one of them coming down, or maybe some of them, all of them will be coming down, but you have one where it's always fluctuating. Okay, so you have to check through and see which one of them is an exception, or are there any exceptions. Okay, so you might get maybe one, or sometimes even two. There might be two exceptions in it. All right, so you need to look out for them. The fourth question is, which of the trends are similar? Right, so now we look out for the similar ones. Are there any similar trends? So, or what are the trends that are going up together or down together? Okay, so you also look out for similarities that happens in the trends. And now we also check for the highs and lows. Highs and lows here is the peak, right? The peaks, right? And then the lowest point. So the highest point and the lowest point. Okay, you have to look out for the highest point and the lowest point. So you can see here the highest point is here, which is between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. You can see the highest point. So radio, it had its highest audience, number of audience in the morning, which is 8 a.m. Between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. right? And if you check that of the television, also had its peak, or the highest number of audience that the television had was within the evening, that is 9 p.m. So 9 a.m. for radio, 9 p.m. for television. But in general, I can see that television actually had a lot of people watching, more than that of radio, okay, throughout. So you'll be able to see all these and answer these questions. What happens is that these questions are very important, and when you answer them, all the answers that you get are your features. So you can, what you get from it, that when you get these features, you'll be using it to write your essay. They'll give you more specific way to write your essay, and after you have done that, the next thing. So let's answer our first question. The first question was, how is the graph behaving as a whole? So you can see, if you take that of the television, it went up and came down, right? And if you take that of the radio, it also went up and came down. So we can see that generally both the television and all the television and radio audiences, they actually grew for some time and then they just go down. Okay, they just fall later on. So it's answered here as both radio and television audience grow in the beginning of the day and falls as time goes by. All right, so radio went up and came down, that of television went up and came down. So we get our answer, both the radio and television audience grow. They grow in the beginning of the day and then later falls as time goes by. So let's answer the second question. The second question is, what are the trends of the individual variables? Okay, so let's take the individual variables and see how it goes. So let's take television. As you can see, television, there are some fluctuations. It just went from zero. So there was no kind of person, no one was actually watching it early in the morning at 6 a.m. So it started from zero and grew, but it went down again, grew, went down again. So there were some fluctuations in it. So it just kept fluctuating. But if you take that of the radio, it went up and then came down. So radio increased dramatically and then fell continuously, right? But if you take television, also has some fluctuations and also fell at the end of the day. So television fluctuated, but radio also increased dramatically and then fell continuously, right? Then that is all. So let's go to the next type of question. Let's go to the next question. The next question is, are there any exceptions from the general trend? Not really. As you can see, it all went up, came down, went up, came down. So they are all of similar trend, but there is no actually any exception. So I wrote here, not available. That you don't have to get answers for all of them. You just have to get the answers, and then those answers will come in when there are main features that actually correspond to the question that you asked. So this one, there wasn't any kind of exceptions in the trend, but sometimes you might get exceptions in the trend. Now our next question is, which of the trends are similar? All right, so which one of them have similar trend? As we can see, both of them are similar, right? Both the radio and television had similar behavior. Okay, so the audience of both media channels increased and then fell later. All right, so that is the answer given here. Maybe you can see different thing, but that's what I see here. Just went up and came down, went up and came down. Okay, so they all have similar trends. So the audience of both media channels increased and then fell later. So that is the general trend for both of them. There is no exceptions actually. So let's go on to the next question. So our last question is to check for the highest point and then the lowest point of each of them. Okay, not all of them will be used. All right, it depends on the prominent one. Okay, so we look at the highest point of each of them, and then we look at the lowest point of each of them and write it down. And remember, all these answers that we get, we will group them and look at the major ones that we want to use, and then we will use them. Okay, but we have to make sure that when we are writing the essay, it has to cover all part of the question. You need to cover the things that we need, that everybody wants to know. Okay, so we have to make sure that I cover all of them. We don't have to take just one part of the essay and write about it. If you don't understand, you can go and revisit on the marking criteria, and you would know that if you partially solve the question, or if you partially give the features or answer the features and leave some of them, you would be getting around a band 5.5 and not 7. Okay, so let's check for the highest and low. So what is the highest point? If you take the highest point of television audience, let's go for the television audience. We can see that television audience actually peaked here, right? They peaked here, and if you bring it down, you can see that it's within this particular point. All right, it's from here, so it's like 8, within 8 p.m. right? 8 p.m. thereabout. All right, and if you take that of the radio, it also down here, also going down here, they're about within 8 to 9, right? So between 8 to 9, 8 to 10, and this one too, the television was between also 8 to 10 p.m. A lot of people listen to the radio in the morning and watch television in the evening. So generally, this is what we understand from this particular question, because the highest audience for the television is in the evening, which is between 8 to 10, and that of the radio also is between 8 in the morning and 10 o'clock in the morning. So generally, we understand that a lot of people listen to the radio in the morning and that of the television in the evening. Now let's look at their lowest points. As you can see here, television, no one actually watches television early in the morning at 6 a.m., which is down to 0%, so no one actually watches it. And if you take that of the radio, their lowest points, let's see, it comes down to this side. All right, so that is the lowest point here. That's around 3 a.m. thereabouts. Okay, so from at 3 a.m. you can see that that is the lowest point of radio. All right, so just a few number of people, few percentage, listen to the radio at 3 a.m. Okay, so we now know our lows and highs. As stated, all these questions, the answer that you got from here are very necessary. You use them in your planning, so you use them to write the essay. So when you are planning, you have to be very, very cautious, because you will not be getting a lot of time to do that. Okay, you're using 20 minutes to write the test, so you have to make sure that you prepare yourself in order to write it well. I would urge that you go systematically as how I'm just dealing with, asking yourself these questions. Dynamic graph, you ask yourself, what is the graph? How is the graph behaving as a whole? What are the individual trends and how are they behaving? Are there any exceptions? Are there any similarities in the trend? What is the highest point and the lowest point? So all these questions, just ask yourself and answer them. Write your answers down, and then it will give you a general view of it and the general and the specific features within the essay. So you look at it and then you now find within this one that we'll be using, we'll group them and find our two main features that you'll be using, because we just have two variables here. So we're just getting about two main features from this one, and then we'll use these two features to write our test. So let's look out for the features that we'll be grouping and be using for our essay. So based on the features, there are a lot of them. Let's see, starting from here. So we saw that both radio television audience grew, and then by the day, and then also fell as time went by. We saw that television fluctuated generally, like in specific manner, and also the radio also increased dramatically and then fell. Some of them are specific, some of them are quite detailed, so we'll be using them as we are writing our essay. We saw that both audience increased and fell later. We saw that radio peaked in the morning and television fell by night. That is something very, very clear. So we can use that one to even write our overview, since we have two of them. So we can use the overview, right? We can use those two features to write the overview. So we will group, or we will organize our main features, and then we will get two main features to write our essay. So organize your idea. Whenever you get all those main features, take the prominent one out, the one that covers at least two or three of them, that covers the entire essay. Okay, you take them and then you use them. So I just took two of them. The first main feature we're going to use is that the peak time of television audience. So the peak time for television audience is in the evening, right? So you can see it here, between 8 to 10 p.m. So that is the peak time for the TV audience. That's when a lot of people want to watch TV. So we got that one. And then the main feature too is that the peak time for that of radio audiences is in the morning. So that's what we also be using here. Okay, so we've got this one and then that one, since it covers both of them, and now we have the two of them, so we can use it. All right, so now we've organized our idea, and now we've got two of these ideas, and this is the time we're going to use this one to write our essay. We start with the introduction, overview, and then we write our two main features. Okay, so let's go and use these two ideas to write our essay. Don't forget that you have some of these specific features that you have written. Don't throw them away. You'll be using them, so you can put them within the text so that you'll be able to write a very good essay. So let's use this as our general overview, and also we will use some of them as our specific features within when we are writing it. All right, so now that we've been able to get our main features down, we've written those two main features down. So what we need to do is to start writing. All right, so as we stated, we'll be using the 4-paragraph system, where our first paragraph will be the introduction, second paragraph will be the overview, the third paragraph will be talking about or describing in detail the first main feature, and then the last one will talk about or describe into detail the second main feature. So let's deal with the first one, which is the introduction. When writing the introduction, it's simply for you to rephrase what has been said within the question. That is, you are telling the audience that this is what the graph is about in your own words. You don't have to write or copy what is here. Okay, you don't have to copy the question. If you remember, when we were dealing with the marking criteria, we said when you do that, you are actually reducing your band score. So it's important that you rephrase it or rewrite it in your own words. So the first thing to do is to state the introduction, or to write the introduction. And if you read the question, it states that the graph below shows radio and television audiences throughout the day in 1992. So how do we state this as an introduction in our own words? So this will be our introduction. So this is how we rephrased it. This is how we rephrase it. You can rewrite it in your own way, but make sure that the very idea of the question is not changed. Okay, so that's what you should know. So writing the introduction, you just have to paraphrase the question. Okay, so it stated here the line graph. So you can see that I stated the actual graph that we are using, okay, which is line graph. I did not state that the graph or the picture. Stated the line graph illustrates for show. Okay, so it illustrates the proportion of people, because this one is in percentage, just change it to proportion. So the line graph illustrates the proportion of people in the UK who watch television and listen to the radio over 24 hours from October to December 1992. Okay, so you can see all these were not in the very question, but because we now understand the question and we are rewriting it in our own idea, we will tell the people that, you see, the line graph that you are looking at it is actually about the percentage of people, or the proportion of people in the UK who watch television and listen to the radio over 24 hours. That is throughout the day. So throughout the day, just change it to 24 hours. That means a day. So over 24 hours from October to December. So it's here, October to December 1992. So you can rephrase it in your own way. You can, all that is needed is that you bring or you keep the idea of the question. Okay, so that's what you have to do. You can pause it and also rewrite your own introduction. Now let's move on to our next paragraph. From introduction, we move on to overview. So let's go and write the overview. So the overview is the summary of the whole thing that you are seeing on the graph. In the overview, you are not expected to write main details. You are not supposed to write any details on it. Okay, so don't write any details in the question on it. Okay, so it's just for you to tell us generally what the whole graph, how the graph ended, okay, or what we see generally in the graph. So that's what you have to look at. And based on our main features, we saw that we had two main features from the planning that we're doing. We saw that the peak time for TV audiences is in the evening, and that of the radio audience is in the morning. So these are the two features that we're using to write our overview, and that's all that we need. You don't have to talk about it oscillating or fluctuating, talking about 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. You don't have to say anything about that. All that you need to note is that it actually peaked in the morning, and that the other also peaked in the evening. That's all that you need to do. So in the overview, make sure that you summarize everything properly, and also comparison is very necessary here. You have to also compare within the overview. So from these two main features, we write our overview as overall. One thing you should know, that whenever you are starting with the overview, because you are generally telling us what the total or the summary is, you have to start with a linking word, a word that actually links it together to show that this is your general view. So we use the word overall. Okay, just use that, and then that will be all. So overall, a significantly greater percentage of the TV audience watched in the evening. You can see that this is the same thing I'm writing here. The peak time for TV audience is in the evening, and I just changed the word. It's about rephrasing, paraphrasing, so that it shows that you have a wide vocabulary and also shows that you understand what you are saying. So a significantly greater percentage of the TV audience watched in the evening, while radio had most listeners in the morning. So you can see that there is superlative and comparative word used here. Okay, so you have to also check the words that you are using. So a significantly greater percentage of the people, and you don't have to exaggerate. You need to know the actual word you are using, because we studied that if you exaggerate or you give an over exertion, you are actually getting a band 6. You have to give an accurate information. Okay, so if you look at the TV audience, yes, very high number, I think almost 50%. Okay, almost half of the people in the UK actually watch television in the evening, which is a greater percentage, all right, of TV audience watch in the evening, and most of the listeners. So if you check that of the television, it's most of them actually watch in the morning, and you can see here that I'm comparing the TV to the radio, and that's what you should be doing. Aside using simple sentences, there have to be compound sentences and complex sentences used. You have to be comparing things too as well. So I use the word while to also compare between the TV audience and the radio audience. Okay, so a significantly greater percentage of the TV audience watched in the evening, while radio had most listeners in the morning. Full stop. Now a second one, over the course of the day, over the course of each day and night, more people watch TV than listen to the radio. So throughout the whole day, right, there were a lot of people who actually watch TV than that of the radio. So throughout the day, more people watch television than listen to the radio. So a lot of people actually watch the television. If you take it from here, starting from 2 a.m., 2 p.m. to throughout, they watch television more than listening to the radio. So a lot of people actually watch television than listening to the radio. So this the overview of what we have within the when it comes to this particular question. Now let's move on to our next paragraph. We are now going to take each of them one after the other and then expand it, explain it properly for you to understand using the details. All right. So when you are writing the main features, we are now going to the main feature one. We're going to write our first main feature and describe it. But one thing I should tell you that each body paragraph, when you are writing them, it should meet the tags. Okay. This one, summary, selection, reporting, comparison. When you take the main features, they should be able to cover all these things within that particular paragraph. So when you are looking at a main feature, you should have a stated feature. The feature should be described. There should be compared features in it, and there should be contrasted features. Whether comparing or contrasting, it has to be within that particular paragraph. So within one paragraph, you should be able to state the features and show the points that you are stating. You should have evidences for them, describing them properly. That means you are reporting it. You should make comparison within that same paragraph, and then if there are any contrast or compare, you should be able to do it within that particular paragraph. So with that said, with our main feature one, we know that we're going to talk about the peak time for TV audience. It is in the evening. All right, so we know that our first one was that we said that the peak time for TV audience is in the evening. So you're going to explain and tell the audience why we said that, showing them the evidences. And it's not only that you can do, you can also show other things. All right, so that is the major thing that will be within this particular paragraph. So let's check. We are going to go through this essay and compare it with this particular paragraph. So we will start from the point and explain it properly with everything. All right, one thing I should tell you is that when you are explaining a particular when you are explaining a feature, especially a variable, don't start describing it one after the other, like every point. No, that is not important, because we are not asking you to report on every point of it. That is not what we are doing. We're just asking you to summarize, select, report, and compare. All right, so don't start saying that there was no audience at 6 a.m. and then it rose to about maybe 5% in at 8 a.m. came down and then went up again, went down. No, you don't have to describe it that way. You need to give the general view of it. So let's look at this one. Now, less than 10% of people watch television between 6 a.m. and 12 noon. So we are now proving to the audience that a lot of people actually watch the television in they watch the television in the evening. So we are just starting from our description. Less than 10% of people watch television between 6 a.m. and 12 noon. So you can see, just taking from this point. So we took it from this point, right? And we said less than 10%. So here is 10%, and you can see that between 6 a.m. and 12 a.m. 12 noon, it was less than 10%, right? So that is it. So less than 10% of people watch TV between 6 a.m. and 12 noon. But this figure increased rapidly after 1 p.m. Okay, so we can say it just increased like that. Now after 1 p.m., yes, 1 p.m. okay, so this is it. So after this particular point, you can see that it just shot up rapidly to this particular side. Okay, so but this figure increased rapidly after 1 p.m., reaching a peak of almost half of the population. You can see I had not mentioned reaching about 50%. Instead of saying 50%, they said almost half, because 50% is half, and because it's not up to 50%, we use approximation, which is almost. So about, almost, that is approximate. So almost 50%. So reaching a peak of almost half of the population at 8 p.m. So I can say about 8 p.m. Okay. After this, the graph records a sharp decline. So after the peak, it shows a very sharp decline. You can see that there are some words I'm using here, which is showing the extent of the decrease. Okay, showing the extent of the decrease. So these are some of the things you can also be using. After this, the graph records a sharp decline in viewers. Okay, so instead of using TV audience, I use viewers, because the viewers are the people that actually watches those particular television. So this is what we call using keywords, using synonyms or wide range of vocabulary. Wide range of vocabulary is not about getting big words, it's about using different words to in a particular content. Okay, being able to express yourself properly in a particular content using other words. Okay, so you don't need to get big words for that. So after this, the graph record a sharp decline in viewers, reaching a low of only a tiny percentage by 3 a.m. the next day. So just a small percentage by 3 a.m. the next day. Okay, so you can see from midnight to this one is another day, right? So this is the next day. That's why. So this 3 a.m. here, just a small percentage of them, just about 2%. So just a tiny percentage of so I can say a small percentage. All right, just use small. Only a small percentage by 3 a.m. the next day. So that's all. Just describe it and then you are done. You can see here, I've been using the approximation, percentages, changing the words, not stating every part of the point. Okay, so this is how you describe them. Now we are done with the TV audience. Let's move on to our next paragraph. All right, so this will be our main feature 2, which is our last paragraph, which is paragraph 4. So in the main feature 2, we are going to now describe saying that the peak time for radio audiences is in the morning, which is the 8 a.m. Okay, so now let's go about also describing that as well. Remember, we stated that you have to make sure there is a summary, selection, reporting, and comparison, as we said we did the TV. All right, let's go on to the paragraph 4. So let's take the radio. Radio started from this side, it increased to the other side, and also came down later. All right, let's describe it. So radio, on the other hand, shows a different trend. Okay, so the most popular time for listeners. Okay, so now I'm just telling you the highest point. Okay, so the most popular time for listeners to be tuned in was just after 8 a.m. So the most popular time, I not describe all these parts, right? Just came here straightforward. So the most popular time is after 8 p.m. when around 27% of the population were listening. So around for approximate, okay, because I cannot see exactly that it's on 30. It's not on 30, so can just say around 27. Okay, here. All right, so around 27% of them. Somebody can even say above 25%, but it's exactly like around 27% of the population were listening. After a brief peak, so you can see here. So after a brief peak, so it just started here, straightforward to 27%, about 27, and then it came down. So it just brief. So after a brief peak, the number dropped steadily. All right, this is what I was talking about. You have to check the way the dropping or the changes is happening, so that you don't exaggerate or you don't give a wrong information. This is actually a steady one. It came down in a steady manner, moderate. Okay, so the number dropped steadily to barely 2%, to barely 2% after. So to barely 2%, apart from fluctuations at around 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. So let's see. So it came down slowly to about 2% here, but there were some fluctuations here. You can see from here, came down here to between 2 to 4. There was some fluctuation coming down here again, 10 to 12, also fluctuations. Okay, so apart from fluctuations at around 4 p.m. here, and then 10 p.m. All right, so as you can see here, all right, so you have this one around 4 p.m. and also around 10 p.m. All right, so just two things that was stated here. It grew up, or the audience just shot up to about 27% and then came down steadily, right, to about 2% here. All right, you can see that, not talk about every single point, but had to coin it in, right? Except for these fluctuations that happened, it just went down slowly or steadily or moderately. Actually, this is moderate. So a brief peak, after a brief peak, the number dropped steadily to barely 2%, apart from fluctuations at around 4 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. The percentage of listeners remained low overnight. So remained low overnight before beginning a rapid ascent from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. high. So it just remained low like that until the next day it just grew up again. So this is how the whole trend for this one is. But you can see here we have some comparisons being made in here too as well. So this is how you write the essay. I'm going to show you the entire essay and you read through, and then this is how you go about with the line graph. I would like you to practice with a lot of line graphs using this particular lesson. You can come and then revisit the questions, and I believe it will help you to write a very good essay. All right, we've combined the full essay now, so let's read through it. The line graph illustrates the proportion of people in the UK who watch television and listen to the radio over 24 hours from October to December 1992. Overall, a significantly greater percentage of the TV audience watched in the evening, while radio had most of its listeners in the morning. Over the course of each day and night, or throughout the day, more people watch TV than listening to the radio. Less than 10% of people watch TV between 6 a.m. and 12 noon, but this figure increased rapidly after 1 p.m., each reaching a peak of almost half of the population at 8 p.m. After this, the graph records a sharp decline in viewers, reaching a low of only a small percentage by 3 a.m. the next day. Radio, on the other hand, shows a different trend. The most popular time for listeners to be tuned in was just after 8 a.m., when around 27% of the population were listening. After a brief peak, the numbers dropped steadily to barely 2%, apart from fluctuations at around 4 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. The percentage of listeners remained low overnight before beginning a rapid ascent from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. high. So this is how you write your essay. As you can see, one paragraph, second paragraph, third and fourth, with one line left in between. So this is how you write the full essay, and that's how you write a line graph essay. We move on to another type of the question, or another type of the graph. Thank you, and you can go over and then watch it again.